Hi, I'm Raees Mohamed, founding partner of R.M. Warner Law. I have found in my law firm that the number of inquiries relating to online harassment and defamation have spiked. So we probably might get 5 to 10 inquiries a day on certain random issues. I think more than half of those issues now relate to online internet harassment, defamation, and that sort of thing. So I figured we would talk a little bit about today some of the more interesting and new platforms where this is happening and how you might, as an investigator, gain value. So the question as an attorney that we always ask before we hire a private investigator is, what's the value that we're trying to get out of hiring a private investigator, right? And as a PI, your value add to your client is you're involved in the due diligence process, gathering facts, helping business people make a business decision, or perhaps helping a lawyer make a due diligence or risk assessment. And so today I want to give you some skills, or hopefully enlighten you on some platforms where perhaps you haven't had any inquiries yet, but you might. The way things are evolving, I would not be surprised if this is something that we're going to talk about today relating to the online world that you actually get inquiries about. Before I go any further, how many people are familiar with the application OnlyFans? One dude. When I tell you all what it is, then you're going to wonder why. So maybe 2 people, right? So it's yeah, nobody else wants to. I'm going to come back to this full circle, and then why these guys are laughing will make a lot more sense. So, okay. So when I was thinking about a topic for today, I said, what can I talk about that is non-controversial, that is professional? And I said, I know, porn. Let's talk about porn, right? That's the most obvious answer. Kind of, right? So I want to kind of get into revenge porn. Revenge porn is a growing problem. It takes many faces. It's not what it used to be. Because of the way people are interacting, spouses are now communicating virtually more frequently. It's not simply a salacious text message or sexting anymore. It's grown to even normal relationships or healthy relationships are doing more things online. And people are taking advantage of that, right? And we'll talk about some examples. But the number one platform that we're seeing this on right now is OnlyFans. And we'll talk about why that is. But at a high level, I just want to make sure I kind of set the landscape. I want to make sure that you have familiarity with some of the more interesting litigation-related or discovery-related problems that lawyers face, and I think customers in the online space face. And I hope that by conveying that to you today as an investigator, you'll have more tools in your toolbox when you are hired to investigate these kind of issues. Does that make sense? Awesome. So this is a little bit about us and some of our my contact information. And by the way, anything that we talk about today, if you have questions on follow-up, you can send me an email. And I prefer this to be, it's a small enough group, more of a dialogue. So if you have questions about things as I'm going through it, feel free to just raise your hand or ask me a question. So some of the things that we've done in the civil side on litigation relating to online discovery, I've been able to discover the identity of online defamation harassers or online stalkers, and we do that routinely in our practice, and oftentimes that involves civil litigation, so we have to file a lawsuit, issue a subpoena. Last time I was here, we talked a little bit about what that process is like, and it's a little bit of a rabbit hole. We've also obtained evidence in e-discovery in order to support our civil litigation needs, especially with online harassment and defamation. And then we've developed strategies for removing content from internet forums. And as you all know, federal law protects a lot of these internet forums like Craigslist. If you have a client who's posted on Craigslist or on eBay or on Facebook, those platforms are immune from liability. There's nothing you can do to them. You'd have to look at the poster directly. So let's talk about why we're here. What is revenge porn? And unfortunately, this is controversial in and of itself because there's no federal statute yet to address this. States are sort of still all over the place. But all you have to think of when you think of revenge porn is the non-consensual sharing of explicit images. And it could be as X-rated as you can imagine, or it could be maybe a less salacious, less controversial. But think about non-consensual image sharing. How many people have teenagers in their household? Probably already happening and you don't even know it, right? Or if you have nieces and nephews. The number of calls that we get, and it's embarrassing for parents because they have to hire a lawyer, they have to get on the call with us, they have their minor son or daughter, and they have to explain, my kid sent this message through Snapchat, or I discovered if they're over 18, that my kid has an OnlyFans account, et cetera, and we'll talk about what the problems are. But revenge porn, growing problem. So what are some revenge porn scenarios? So OnlyFans. So for those of you who know what the platform is, I think most of you do. But for those of you who don't, it's basically an online platform where you can create content, whether it's video, image, or text conversations, and you can charge a monthly fee to a user base for whatever type of content that you want. And of course, you give this in the hands of consumers, the first thing they think of is pornography, right? So it's unbelievable because in the last year, because of retail issues and people losing their jobs, particularly in the restaurant industry, many people have migrated to OnlyFans to make a side hustle living. And so it's not uncommon for college students even to be making thousands of dollars per week selling pictures or images to a subscriber base. And so you might have 100 people who pay you $50 a month for access to you. And these are everyday people. Some of those accounts are anonymous. Some of them are not anonymous. But for whatever reason, you give people a tool, the first thing they think of is doing X-rated stuff with it. I don't know what it is about human beings, but that's just the way we think. Of all the good things you could think of with this tool. But the subscriber base, so the number of people buying the images skyrocketed, but the number of people jumping on the platform has also skyrocketed. And that's what's creating these problems, right, of leaks. Posting pictures or videos on pornographic sites or social media. So we've had instances where people's images, again, salacious, X-rated, whatever the scale is of that, are getting posted to sites like Twitter. Now, you can imagine if you were in an intimate relationship with somebody and you happen to take a few pictures or maybe a small video, and the next morning you wake up to a text message that shows you on a website or some public forum. That's horrifying. And those calls are rising. It is a problem. The problem is there's a stigma associated with calling professionals to address the issue. But we get those calls. Another common problem is extortion or sextortion. This doesn't just happen to the celebrity types. It's happening to everyday people. Where again, ex-lover or perhaps a stark enemy gets access to images of you in some compromising position, or maybe it was a consensual sharing before, and they use it to extort you. That, hey, now that I have this and now that I'm going to publish it all over social media and put it on your Snapchat and put it on Facebook, now that I have your attention, I want you to do X, Y, Z, right? Give me some Bitcoin, or you send me these Amazon gift cards, or wire this money into my account, or continue to send me the images, otherwise I'll publish this publicly. And that's extremely scary. Angry ex-boyfriend, we talk about that, and of course there's always jokes aside, Kim Kardashian types, people who actually want to put this stuff out there for some sort of controlled publicity stunt, and then it gets out of hand. But these are common problems. So what do you do, right? Well, before we get to that, what is OnlyFans? OnlyFans, as we talked about, is a subscription-based platform. So what does that mean? That means that you can charge $5, $10, $20 a month, whatever it is that the person wants to charge. But the important thing is it's a one-on-one communication. You're not putting it out there on a platform like Instagram where somebody's watching it live or people are seeing it in mass. It's a one-on-one. And the dangers of one-on-one communications are what? You can save them. You can screenshot, you can record, you can do whatever you want to make somebody uncomfortable. And since we've been in quarantine and people are bored, they've also lost their jobs, and they are desperate for money. This has been a growing source of income for people, and it's also been a growing source of legal problems. Hopefully, we talked a little bit about the platform. I think you guys get the idea. But this is just one platform. I just want to emphasize something. There's nothing stopping people from doing this via text message. The key thing about this is it's a source of income. And I kid you not, there are people who are making $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $10,000, $40,000 a month using this platform. And when people get the vibe that, hey, I can sell my content, my images, there's some women who just take pictures of their feet and sell that online. Don't ask me, it's not my thing, but apparently that's a thing. And so I want to make sure that you understand this is not something that's going to disappear. This is not a fad. The subscriber base on this is just skyrocketed, and it's growing, and it's not going to go anywhere, in my opinion. So revenge porn, I think you understand what that means. It's non-consensual sharing. Sextortion, I think you understand what that means. You're getting extorted relating to your nude images or your video. False light and catfishing. This is interesting. So I had an inquiry in my office the other day where it was somebody said, look, this is not me, but it is my face on somebody else's body, right? And if Photoshop is just one tool, but it's more and more common for people to say, this is actually, Rachel, and here's her picture. Look, how can you deny this? And it looks almost exactly like that person, because somebody was creative enough to find a body type and cut and paste their face, or do it the inverse, where they have their body and they put somebody else's face on it. The bottom line is you can do what's called catfishing and pretend to be somebody and solicit somebody's attention with that. Now, how do you prove or disprove that that's you or not you in a scenario like that? And what are your options? And the reason people are coming to my firm is because I'm a lawyer and they generally want this stuff to stop. They want to sue the other person. They want to figure out who this is. And maybe they want money damages. But as an investigator, you might have this situation come to you because maybe a client is already working with you on a case. Maybe it's a criminal case, maybe it's a family law case, or a corporate due diligence issue. So it's important to understand all of the different things that can happen from this and what the repercussions could be. So with online platforms, everybody is probably familiar with the terms of service. It's the thing that you click to accept that nobody reads anymore, but they should, which basically give the platform permission to do certain things with the user's information. And pretty much across the board, every single platform, every single mobile application, including OnlyFans, including Instagram, including Snapchat, they address intellectual property rights. What you can do with content that you post onto the website. And this is the first place we usually look when somebody asks or somebody comes to us with a problem is, what does the platform say in their rule book on what your options are? And OnlyFans specifically says, right, that essentially you can't use somebody else's content. You can't use, whether commercially or otherwise, you can't repost or republish or even edit other people's images and use them. And if you have a problem, specifically on OnlyFans addresses this, and there's a link in here, and we'll share the slides if you want to read this more carefully. But the bottom line here is you can actually use the Digital Millennium Copyright Act to get this taken down, and we'll talk about what that is. How many people know what a Dmca Takedown is? Have you heard of that? You've heard of it, right? Do you remember in the days of when Dana White was first chasing people, the president of the UFC Federation, saying, you've broadcasted this, you've exceeded it, exceeded the scope of your license. So if a bar or a restaurant publishes a UFC fight and they say, hey, we have a special promo, it's $1 drafts and you can watch this MMA fight. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
That's still a thing.
It's still a thing. And so it's 100% a thing. And I think UFC loses over $1 billion a year to what is in fact a copyright issue, because you're supposed to buy a commercial license for that. So bars and clubs need to have a commercial license. And if you exceed the scope of your non-commercial license, which is broadcasting it in a public gathering like this, then the UFC can come after you for the lost revenue. And Dana White recently said that that's still like $1 billion cost to his company. On a much smaller scale, we have a concept like that applies to everybody, which is you as an individual have a right to your likeness. So nobody can use your likeness in a commercial capacity especially. They have to get your consent. They have to get a license to that content. And so when your content is published on OnlyFans or Twitter or Snapchat or any of those platforms, the first thing you're going to look at is the DMCA. And we'll talk about the process for that. I think we said earlier, there's no uniform revenge porn statute. There are states that have addressed this issue. California is one of them. In California, if you use a non-consensual explicit image of somebody else, you can actually get 6 months of jail time or a fine of up to $1,000 or both. And it's a misdemeanor. It seems kind of petty and really low for something this significant, but I think most states will catch on and publish their own laws. It was a Class 5 felony. And it's interesting to see the dialogue of legislatures, because the conversation is kind of like this. Here's the problem. We need to pass a statute to address it. And if it relates to images, immediately the first reaction is, well, isn't that a free speech right? And pornography, we always kind of, at least in American jurisprudence, we consider it a right, a freedom to do what you want with your body and have other people view it. And so that actually was an obstruction to Arizona having its law. But it is a class 4 felony, a class 5 felony in Arizona. And it's actually more harsh than California. It's, 3.5 years of 3.75 years in prison potentially. So now you can kind of see why this has teeth and why, as an investigator, if this comes across your table, why this is something you should pay attention to and you should bring to your client's attention, and why this should be enforced. The statute specific says disclosed by electronic means. What does that mean? It could be a cell phone, it could be a tablet, it could be any electronic device, it could be over the internet, etc. So how do we combat revenge porn? What do you do? And the good news is you don't have to come to a lawyer right away. I think as an investigator, the first thing you're going to tell your client if they come to you with this issue is, have you tried to do a Dmca Takedown? And we actually have a blog that outlines exactly what a Dmca Takedown is, what the steps are. It's not complicated. Some websites actually have a form that you can fill out and submit if you're the victim of somebody using your image without your permission. But it's a process, and typically, because the DMCA provides liability to the platforms, they respond immediately and take the image down. And you can see why it's a dangerous tool to use, even if it's if somebody's properly using your image and you just don't like it, you say, well, I changed my mind, I want to take it down. They can actually, the platform can actually come after you for damages, right? So you have to be careful, but generally speaking, the platforms respond immediately, take down the image, and if they don't take down the image, then you actually get 10 days to sue if you want, to get an injunction or in some cases damages. So it's a powerful tool. Every platform in the United States, every application, and not only in the United States, but any platform that markets here to our user base, this is a tool you have. So it's a very, very powerful tool. The other thing that we get called into, bullet point 2, is, hey, I want to know who did this to me, right? I want to know who's behind it. Maybe it's happened before, or you want to avoid it from happening again. And I want to discover who this is. And we talked a little bit last time I was here about discovering the identity of an anonymous person. And if there's time, happy to talk about it today. But some people will retain us, or perhaps they're going to retain you to say, what are my options? How do I figure out who this is? And this is what I mean when I say it's no longer about tailing somebody's car. I mean, you have to understand how the internet works. You have to understand how these mobile applications work. People who come to us, we kind of evaluate. Is there a civil action that we can do for you? Can we sue for damages if it's a copyright issue or a trademark issue? And there's a whole process of subpoenaing the website, the application, to get the user information before it's deleted. And sometimes it's a rabbit hole, right? Because people nowadays, they use VPNs, or they use burner phones, or they have dynamic IPs, so it's really hard to discover the identity. It's not something that it's automatically there. The information's not automatically there. It's a process. And we'll talk about that process a little bit more. People want to sue for damages, of course. They want to know what options they have. Whether you have the right to get money for somebody using your image or not just depends on the circumstance. Did they use it in an advertisement? Did they use it simply to send to a group of people to make a joke about it? What did they actually do with your image? There's no automatic right to money unless it crosses into the criminal side, right, where there's fines. Get the poster criminally prosecuted. So those of you who work with law enforcement, probably everybody here, if this happens to your client, you absolutely want to get law enforcement involved. Because this is such a growing problem, and with technology growing as fast as it is, sometimes law enforcement doesn't have the tools either. And they obviously have to go, unless there's a high-level national security problem, they have to go through the process of getting a warrant or a subpoena as well. So it's all about preservation. You want to, if this happens to your client or you're charged with investigating this issue, one of the first things you do is you tell your client, preserve everything you can. Take screenshots. If you have a copy of the image that was shared, save it in electronic form, right? Because electronic images have metadata that we can scoop and analyze. So you want to get on it right away. You want to examine your options right away and preserve evidence right away. The other reason you might want to hire an investigator or lawyer is to warn others about this person. And usually people like this are repeat offenders. Everybody's familiar with Snapchat, the application Snapchat. I had a gal in my office the other day who told me the story about how her sister was unfortunately, her Snapchat got hacked. And most people who are hacking know you, and they can guess your passwords and do that. But sometimes it's more nefarious, where people can actually break into your mobile application. And it's criminal, sure, but what do you do when it happens? So with her sister, her Snapchat application was hacked. And of course, what did she have? She's a 19-year-old girl, very social, playing the dating pool. What does she have in her Snapchat? Nudes. Plenty of them, right? Ones that you wouldn't want people to see, that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, this guy republished those nudes to all of her friends that are in the Snapchat application. So the way Snapchat works, you're on the application and you say, your friend just shared an image with you, right? Or your friend is live. Is that how it works?
It's not live, but they can send it to like a bunch of people at once.
They can send it to a bunch of people at once.
Yeah.
So she gets notified and people are asking her, hey, what's going on, right? Or thumbs up, like, hey, send me more. And she has no idea what's going on. Unfortunately for her, the good side is this guy was caught, and it was some dude she didn't know who was in Virginia who this is what this guy did, is he would hack women's phones, their Snapchat applications specifically, and he would sell their images or extort them for money. And fortunately, law enforcement caught him. And I think in this case, one of the girls that he did this to was 16, and so he actually got busted for child pornography. But the point is, this has real impact, and this is not just something that's happening once in a while. It's very, very common. The problem is people are afraid to talk about it. Digital Millennium Copyright Act. So there are formal processes with it, but basically just the key takeaways of the DMCA is you do not need to have a registered copyright. So the way copyright law works is if you or your client are the author, so you took a picture, or like we're recording today's presentation, if you are the author, you recorded it, you have a copyright in it the second that it's recorded. Same with art. If the second you painted it, or with music, the second you recorded it, if it's original work, you have a copyright, or at least you have copyright protection. The extra protection you get from registering it is you get to sue for damages. So let's just make sure we understand that. So you don't have to have a registered copyright to do a DMCA takedown, to demand that a platform like OnlyFans or Snapchat, Facebook, Google take it down. One thing you should know about DMCA is that message goes to, the takedown request goes to the platform. The person who's still the offender, who still has the images, they might be doing this on 100 different websites, right, or 100 different platforms. So it doesn't stop them from doing it again and again. And that's why you want to get an investigator or an attorney involved. As we said, most websites have a DMCA process in their terms of service. So you would look there to figure out what that process is. But you have to repeat that process for every website where your images are posted. So it is kind of a hassle. I kind of want to switch gears a little bit, if this is still interesting, and talk about how you find people's identities online. Some of this is duplicative of what we talked about last year, but I figured it'd be a good refresher. Should we do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this kind of connects with the issue of you've found the image. Maybe you've recovered the image, you've had the platform take it down, but now you want to know who's doing this to you. And this could be true for nude leaks, or it could be for a fake review that's posted, or a website about you, or a friend that's posted that you're trying to dig up who's behind this. All of this applies to this process, or this process applies to all of the above. So how do you find an anonymous poster online? So the first thing we have to remember is we love our First Amendment, and anonymous speech is protected by the First Amendment online. So you have a right to create an account, a John Doe account, Facebook, or whatever platform you want, and say whatever you want, as long as it's not defamatory. And the fact that your identity is anonymous is a protected issue under the First Amendment. But if it's defamatory, that's an exception. Or of course, well, before we even get there, private social media accounts or companies are not bound by the First Amendment. This was a popular issue, right? Not to get political, but this is a popular issue just a few weeks ago with, hey, how can you take the president's Twitter account down? And the answer to that is basically the platform doesn't give a shit who it is. That's the answer. Platforms are private corporations. They can do what they want. Now, the philosophical question of is it correct or is it proper or not is a totally different question. But if you ask me as an attorney who operates in this world, can Facebook or Twitter simply turn off somebody's account? Absolutely they can. They can do it anytime. In fact, they should do it more often, but they don't. And that's because they're protected. Technically, the owners of Facebook, Twitter have the power to decide what stays and what goes. Apparently, Twitter ban was popular the last time I made this slide. So we have a few hoops to jump through. This is not an automatic thing. When you're trying to uncover the identity of a poster online, you don't get an automatic access, green card to that. You have to jump through some hoops. So in Arizona, the hoops, this is just a case that was decided in 2007 called the Mobilisa case. So this case sets the precedence for what you need to have if you're the victim and you want to identify who's harassing you. And you're sending a subpoena to Facebook or Instagram or OnlyFans. This case tells us what elements you need to cover. The facts of this case is the plaintiff sent a private email to his girlfriend using a corporate email account. Email was obtained by an unknown party who forwarded it to the plaintiff's management team. And the plaintiff filed a lawsuit against multiple what we call John Doe defendants. And the case, the court analyzed it and basically said, listen, you've got to meet very specific requirements. And the requirement in a nutshell, and I think I cover it later, but the requirement is you need to show that you have a legitimate case. Like you need to show that if you were in front of a judge, before we give you the identity, that you have everything else you need. You can prove everything else in order to win this. Think about why that's important. If you're trying to uncover the identity of somebody who did nothing unlawful, they didn't defame anybody, they didn't infringe anyone's copyright, right? They didn't do anything illegal, you don't have a right to know who they are. And we believe that so significantly that the law says you have to prove everything else before we even give you the identity of this poster. Does that make sense? So we have to then rely on investigators to say, I need to know everything I can about this person. Or, the legal side of it, I need to show damages. I need to be able to show how this affected me. I need to be able to show the chain of custody, if you will, of where this message was disseminated. And show that to the court before they even grant me a subpoena. TheDirty.com was another very popular, I think it's still, is Dirty even still a website? I think it still is, but it was a popular website where people would just post people that they had bad experiences with or they didn't like, and you see a lot of people who were popular club goers who hit on girls who have bad experiences and they post them on this website. So this is the website where you go and you want to tell the world that somebody has herpes. This is the site where you go and do it. Like, this person has herpes, don't go on a date with. Anyway, so we used to get a lot of inquiries on this website. It's actually kind of calmed down because I guess Facebook is a more popular place to do that. In this particular case, the subpoena was rejected, saying that it violated the First Amendment because they just simply, across the board, whenever these platforms get these subpoenas, that's their first response, is we don't have to give you this ID. Our users get First Amendment protection. Sorry, you have to tell us why you can meet this requirement. So then we have to do our lawyering part, write them a love letter that says, I'm sorry you're wrong, here's why we're right, here's why we deserve to have the identity of the poster. So what do you do once you get the ID of this poster? Do you start harassing them? Right, so I have clients who always, hey, I want to hire this private investigator, and once I figure this out, I'm going to stick it to them. I'm going to start putting signs in their yard. I'm going to put dog shit on their lawn. I'm going to start doing all this. Like, no, don't do that. Let's do it the legal way. Let's see if you have recourse against this person, right? So the first thing we do is we actually have to give notice to the author that, hey, we actually know who you are, and we're going to pursue litigation against you. So we post a notice on the same website where they were defaming us. Contact them using the same internet medium they're using. So if it's Facebook, if they're anonymous on Facebook, you have to post to their Facebook account that we just subpoenaed Facebook and we're going to discover who you are, etc. We have to inform the user that their identity is being sought for such and such legal reason, and we have to give relevant information. Hey, we're suing you for defamation, or I'm suing you for online harassment. I've had cases where family law, we don't do family law cases, but family law attorneys would contact me and say, hey, I think my client, I represent the husband, and I think the wife is trying to set up the husband because they have this custody battle coming up. There's a hearing coming up in February or March, and they're trying to post these things about me, basically saying I'm a bad father. Like, look at this guy out in the bar intoxicated. It's 3 a.m. The kids are home. And all these things are false, Raees. That picture was taken at 5 p.m. On a weekend where my kids weren't even with me, right? So what do you do? And how do you respond to those things? Well, once you figure out who this is, you have to give them notice on Facebook. And you have to give the person direct notice and tell them why exactly you're seeking the information. And you have to give them an opportunity to actually respond to the request. This is why I say it's not a green card, like just because they did something unlawfully, on the civil side, that you just get to learn their ID. There's all these steps you have to go through. Yeah, don't skip this. This is a very important step, to inform the user that their identity is being sought and give the relevant case information. Otherwise, you don't get the subpoena. So sometimes people come to us statute of limitations. Sometimes people come to us with an issue. Hey, here's this website. It's clearly false. We can prove that it's false. It's defamatory. It's about me. It's causing me a lot of harm. I'm losing customers. What can I do about it? I don't know who's doing it. The first step is we want to find out who it is. But unfortunately, if they come to us in Arizona, the statute of limitations for defamation specifically is 1 year from the date of publication. It's 1 year. It's one of the shortest statute of limitations. So if you come to our firm 2 years after it was published, there's nothing we can do for you. Usually there's not. And it kind of sucks because it's 1 year from the date it was published, not the date that you learned about it. So if you weren't diligent and you weren't searching your name in Google, or you weren't being diligent, I guess, in protecting your brand, and you didn't learn about it until 2 years after, there's really not much we can do unless we can figure out other arguments, or maybe if we can show another cause of action that has a higher statute of limitations. But if you don't do it timely, the point is you don't get the ID. You don't get to learn who this person is. Courts are also going to look through a balancing test to determine if there's any other way you can discover who this is, or do we have to actually force Facebook to give us the information? Usually the answer is we can't figure this person out unless we have the information. So this is what you get, right? So people often who don't practice in this area ask me, what do I get if I subpoena Facebook or Google or Twitter and I'm in a defamation or some sort of harassment case? What kind of information would they have? So this information is called the subscriber information. So this is typically across the board with online platforms. This is the common sort of stack of data that you get. But this is what we would normally ask for. This is kind of a standard ask. Anybody who hires me, I probably would even ask for a little bit more. I want to make sure I'm not overbroad. What I'm asking for, and this is a direct quote from, I think, one of the subpoenas I did. Any and all documents and stored information containing the identity, personal info, or contact information of the author, party or parties involved with creating or publishing the defamatory content. It's a lot of words, just anything you know about the author. Then I get more specific. I ask for any and all documents that are electronically stored that could lead to the identification of this person. And because of privacy issues, these websites collect everything you can imagine on a person. So this list is probably not even as holistic as most apps now. But at a minimum, I want email addresses, right? I want IP addresses, what browser they were using, what operating system they were using, the times that this platform was accessed might be relevant, how much time they spent on the website, who their internet service provider is, like if it's Cox Communications or somebody else, and any other info perhaps from Google Analytics if it's a business website or if they run advertising. Why would this information be helpful? I mean, sometimes people are stupid and they do stupid things with their personal email address, and that's all you need. And you can see it's James Smith at asu.edu. I've had cases where people aren't thinking and they use a work or a school email. Sometimes people are smart and they use a Proton email, or Proton email. For those of you who don't know, it's The servers for Proton email are not on US shores. And essentially, you can't find out who's behind a Proton email address unless it's something criminal, potentially. So tip for you guys. IP addresses are great, but alone don't tell us anything. Sometimes you can use a basic IP lookup tool. Do you guys know what that is? You can just type in IP lookup, and it gives you relatively accurate location information using IP. But even then, sometimes it's not accurate. So basically what we do is we use all this information, we try to triangulate who this person is. And sometimes we're successful and we can tell exactly who this person is through this. One particularly useful example, and I'll just go through this very quickly, getting a IP address from email. So I don't know if you know this, but almost every email provider you use can tell you the IP address of the email that was just sent to you. With no legal tools, any single one of you can do this from probably not from your phone, you'd probably need a desktop or a laptop, but this information is provided to you in an email. So I'm going to show you real quick how you can actually access this information. So the information I'm talking about is called email header information. So you can get email header information from email that shows an IP address. But for Gmail, I think Gmail automatically shows Google's corporate server IP address. So it's not helpful for Gmail addresses. Yeah. You're going to click on Show Original. And the way you get this, you know those 3 dots in your email inbox? If you go to the email that was sent to you, you'll see these 3 dots. And I'm using, I think, Google as an example. And you click Show Original. And then you have this little piece of info, which says, pass with IP. And there's an address there. So every email across any email provider, it has to pass over a server, and it has to come back into an inbox server, if you will, and an outgoing server. And this is what this data is telling you. If you click Learn More, I thought I had a slide on this, but if you click on Learn More, sometimes that IP address alone it tells you exactly where this person is. Sometimes you have to go into Learn More, and you have to extract additional information on where that server is. But that's it. It's literally 3 clicks. You're going to go into the email header information, Show Original, and that IP, if you were to paste that into an IP lookup, will tell you exactly where that email came from, which server it came from. In the case of Google, it will tell you which server, but anybody else, you can get a pretty accurate hit on where that came from. So that's without using any subpoenas or lawyers or anything. I think it's pretty valuable. I use that from time to time. I think people are savvy, though, especially people who are up to the criminal side of things, but in the civil side of things, this is super helpful, especially for clients on a budget. They don't have to go to court before we can start some preliminary discovery things. Questions on any of this stuff? I know it was like drinking from a fire hose. We talked about all kinds of things, but I just want to make sure that you got some value out of the fact of kind of what's going on, like what's in the ether of common legal issues. And I know clients come to me and ask me for investigators who, when they have this issue, the first thing is, hey, I'm working with an investigator. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, does this private investigator know anything about how to do these things? Or are they generally aware of what is accessible and what is not? And so I feel like in today's age, with leaks and all these kinds of things, that these are just some of the tools you should have in your toolkit.